Thank you everybody for coming. We do have people continuing to show up, but I'm Stacy from the Gilford Library, and we are so excited to have you here for this program. I know I couldn't wait to listen to it because we have a lot of backyard birds and we want to make sure we're doing everything right. So I am going to turn this over to Dr. Hale and he can get us started. Enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stacy. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Usually I'd say coming to the library tonight for this bird talk, but thanks for tuning in from your homes this evening. And we'll have a little get together and chat about birds, which is one of my favorite topics, bird watching in particular. Talking about wild birds, not particularly caged birds. That's kind of a different topic, or pet birds. This is about our breeding season backyard birds. Before we dive right in, we go through a couple introductory steps. First of all, my name is Steve Hale. You can call me Steve. I'm coming to you from Barrington, New Hampshire on the seacoast. And in 2016, I started the small business Open World Explorers, through which I give presentations to libraries, birding clubs, historical societies, and things like that. And my presentations are mostly about birds, but also about ecology of New England and some of my hiking adventures and things like that. I also give bird watching tours. I'm a guide. I'll be guiding at the Rangeley, Maine Birding Festival this weekend. So if any of you are motivated or longing for the Rangeley area, which is fantastically beautiful in Rangeley, Maine, have a look or message me about information on how to get connected with that. Okay. My full-time job is at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, where I work in science and engineering education. I work in professional development for teachers and also helping to get young people excited about science and engineering as career opportunities. This presentation is going to focus on backyard birds of the breeding season. I also have a presentation on winter backyard birds. Some of you may have seen that one. This one has three main components to it. Much of what we're going to talk about is bird identification, how you identify some of these birds that we find to be common and some not so common in our backyards. And we'll also talk a little bit about feeding birds towards the end, okay? And I have a nice video I want to show you for those of you who are interested in hummingbirds. We're going to talk a little bit about some scientific aspects of hummingbird distributions, where they are, when they arrive, those types of things. Lastly, before we dive right in, I want to set up the presentation as a little bit of a discussion, meaning I want you to communicate with me during the presentation via box. We are going to all state, we're going to have the audience muted because there's so many of us, but please do not hold your questions to the end. If we're talking about something and a question pops up related to what we're discussing, go ahead and post it in there. I can view the chat box and I will field those questions and we'll take them as they come. If you have questions that aren't related to what we're talking about, then please do hold those till the end, okay? We are going to cover a lot of topics about bird identification. If you're interested in beefing up your bird ID skills on some of these species, you might want to have a pad and pencil or pen with you to jot down some notes. Some of the things I'm going to be providing will be a good supplement to what you might have from your favorite bird field guide. And the last point is the presentation is set up as a quiz. You'll notice on this cover slide here that I indicate the name of the species. On all of the subsequent slides, I will not identify the species at the beginning, but later after some discussion, we'll reveal what the species is. While that's going on, use your chat box to go ahead and type in what you think the bird is. You may know or you may guess. If you're really guessing, put a little question mark. What that does is it gives me feedback on how certain people are and maybe where there are misconceptions that I can address to help improve your identification, to give you things to look for, maybe as early as tomorrow when we might all be out birding. Okay, now I'm going to start out with a quick question. How many of you consider yourselves to be bird watchers? Please go ahead and type that into the chat box. Type that in so I can see how many of you. You can just say yes. You can say maybe, not sure, beginner. Give me some idea if you consider yourself to be a bird watcher. There are 3 characteristics that I like to think of as someone being a bird watcher. Okay, very good, Dan. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks, Ann. Okay, Barbara, some beginners. Okay, the 3 characteristics are, first, you need binoculars. You really need to get good up-close views to see the field characteristics of the bird in order to distinguish them and tell them apart from different species. Some of them can be very similar. The second thing you need is a field guide to the birds of the area, okay? A lot of people have field guides to the birds of the area, but if you don't, I'm sure Stacy and others at the Gilford Public Library can help you find one that you can borrow, or borrow a couple and maybe decide which one you want to purchase. I'm sure the library has a few. And then the third characteristic of being a bird watcher is you have to use the first 2 things together. You have to use the bird book and the binoculars. You can't have the bird book by the window and the binoculars in the closet. Nope, you got to get them both out there beside each other. So when you're looking at the birds, you then, the bird flies away, you get out your book and you leaf through. Even if you think you know what it is, maybe go read up a little bit. When you're leafing through, you will learn lots more about other birds. Okay, so with that, let's jump in and talk about this American crow. Okay, I've given you this one. In the future, you're on your own. You have to provide the answers to me. But the American crow is an all black bird. Okay, legs are black, bill is black. Everything is black, including the eye. Often people say, what about the grackles, the common grackle? They're all black and they have trouble sometimes distinguishing those. Well, the common grackle actually has a pale eye, a pale yellowish eye, yellow to white even. And it shows out noticeably. And the grackle will have a purplish look. The head is actually a glossy purple in the grackle. And then there's the raven, which is another kind of large crow. It has a much more massive, thick bill and is considerably larger. You can tell the 2 apart in flight much more readily. Okay, Dan, we can talk about binoculars towards the end. That's a good question, and we'll get people some information on getting a good set of binoculars. Okay, now as we wade into the talk here, the first section is on non-feeder birds. These birds are unlikely to be coming to your feeders, but they are around our homes. They're nesting in our shrubberies. They might even be nesting on structures on our homes, or maybe just living in the outer landscaping. They might just be passing over the airspace of our homes, but they are often associated with our yards. Okay, we'll start out a little easy and we'll get tougher. This is a very, very common backyard breeding season bird. Okay, very good, Anne, Diana, excellent. Okay. Very good. The answers are coming in nice and strong on this bird with this noticeable yellow, I'm sorry, not yellow, orange breast, belly, and its upper parts are dark, grayish and black. But look at the very bright yellow bill. Okay, very good. You guys got this one correct. I promise they're going to get more challenging. Okay, this is the American robin. This bird bounces around on our yard, our grassy lawns, and eats worms and things like that. Some people are unaware or surprised to learn that robins are actually around all winter long. Many robins do migrate away and go down to Florida and the Gulf Coast states, but there are also many robins that overwinter in New Hampshire. And I've been snowshoeing in January up in the White Mountains and have encountered robins up there. Robin is not necessarily a very good harbinger of spring. All right, this bird's a little tougher. It's about the size of a robin, similar size. Okay, look at the color, overall gray. Okay, you might even say charcoal gray colored, but look at the little black cap, black tail, and then this feature here, the red underpants. This is actually a bird that very commonly nests in rhododendron and azaleas that might be planted right up against our homes. And I remember growing up as a kid in Pennsylvania, looking out my bedroom window, and I could look down into the rhododendron and see the nest of this bird. Very good, Anne. Okay, this is the gray catbird. Okay? Gray catbird. I'm going to just take a minute here, everyone. Okay, and now I think everyone can still hear me. Okay, so the gray catbird. And the gray catbird is in the same family as another very popular and pretty common bird we'll talk about later, and we'll talk about them together. But notice the red underpants of this bird. This is a feature you don't often see because these birds tend to be low, hanging out in low shrubbery. So very often you only see the tops or looking down on these birds. But sometimes you do get to see that. Gray catbird. We'll talk about a little bit about vocalizations of those birds too. Now look at this character. He's kind of overall brown. Nothing remarkable about this bird in terms of its color, right? It's kind of dingy. Let's do this though. With me, the number of bars on the tail. Thanks to that, wood thrush guessed in. It's not correct, but that's okay. We'll go through this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. You know, you get the picture. There's a lot of horizontal bands on this tail. And then look at the wings. The bands continue even up on the feathers of the wings. These birds are heavily banded, and that's a characteristic of this group or family of, I'm going to type it into the chat box. The family are the wrens. Okay, the wrens are heavily barred with these horizontal barrings. And this one likes to nest in cavities, or another word, holes. Very often, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts will make lots of bird boxes as a project, and you might put them out in your yard. They might give them to you for a birthday present or Mother's Day or something nice like that. So you hang it off a tree in your front yard, and it very often attracts these guys. They like to fill it with a jumble of sticks. And I remember growing up in Pennsylvania, my mom would say, Steve, go out and clear the paper tube. It's filled with sticks again. And some of you might not recall, but the paper tube is this thing that the newspaper delivery person would bring the daily newspaper. We don't really do that very often anymore because we get our news from other sources, but it used to be a thing. These birds, the males of this species, this is a house wren, he will actually fill sticks in multiple cavities in his territory. And then the females will select which one that she wants to turn into a nest. but that means there's all these cavities in the area that are filled with jumbles of sticks. So if you have nest boxes out, you might think there's something nesting in there, but it's actually what we call a dummy nest. It's a nest that was built but never used or selected for use. So Debbie asked, should you clean out bird boxes? And I think actually the answer to that question is a pretty good yes. It's a good idea. Well, after the breeding season is over. And if you're not sure, then just wait till it snows. Once it snows, then you can clean out your birding box. But they will most likely be done using any bird box by August. But if you're not sure, go ahead and wait till it snows. Clean it out. These guys will they'll readily replace the contents with stuff to rebuild the nest. That also is the case for things like bluebirds and things too. Okay, so this is the house wren. How many of you have house wrens nesting around your homes in Gilford, or if you're not from Gilford, from wherever you are? Go ahead and type in your chat box yes or no if you have nesting house wrens, or if you've seen these guys around your yard. They're a little bigger than a chickadee, maybe a little longer than a chickadee, not as fat as a chickadee. Stacy says yes, that she's had them. Dan's not aware if he's had house wrens or not. Okay, anybody else? Ann Holbrook, yes, in Hanover. Okay, very good, Ann. Yeah, they're pretty common nesters around our neighborhood environments. Okay, Andrew's had some in Thetford. Good. How about this one? You might not have seen this around your yard, but I'm going to bet many of you have heard this bird. Go ahead and type in, what family does this belong to? Okay, people are coming in with the correct species. Stacy's got this, Debbie's got this, good Nancy. Okay, good Dan, Tina. All right, this is the barred owl, and I really like you guys have it spelled correctly. Sometimes people think this is Bard, B-A-R-D, like Shakespeare's owl. You know, he's the bard, the poet. But it's not Shakespeare's owl. This bird gets its name for the vertical bars on the chest. Okay. And notice the deep, dark black eyes. And notice how the face is divided into two, what we call facial discs. The structure of these facial discs is very similar or compatible or very a parabolic dish. And what does a parabolic dish do? It takes incoming radiation. When it reflects, it focuses it on a certain area and magnifies it in that way by focusing it. And that's what's happening here on the side of many of the owl's faces. It focuses the sound waves onto a particular spot on the skull. And you can imagine that that spot would be the ear hole or the ear. And the ear, you can't see it. It's just a hole in the side of the skin. It's covered by feathers. But the owls have this ability to hear very well. I'm going to play the song of the barred owl. And go ahead and type in if you feel like you've heard this. And maybe even recently, if you've been sleeping with your windows open, although maybe now you're sleeping with your air conditioner on and you can't hear anything. But on some of those other nights, do you hear this? Stacy hears them most nights, and Ann's had a aha reaction. So that's what that is. Yeah, that's the barred owl. This is our most common owl in New Hampshire. Particularly, it's also the one that's the most vocal. They aren't shy about vocalizing, and sometimes you can see these guys out during the day hunting. And sometimes in winter in particular, when food is scarce and they're particularly hungry and they have to extend their foraging hours, this often happens in late winter. You might be more likely to see a barred owl out in the open looking for prey. So very good, the barred owl. Sounds like a lot of you have those around. This is another backyard. This is our most common bird of our suburbs and open space areas in New Hampshire. It's our largest soaring hawk, okay? And it's pretty readily identifiable. So I'm gonna help you. I see a number of you have gotten it correct. Very good. This is the red-tailed hawk. And you might be keying in on this orangish, reddish looking tail, and that would be a good clue. We don't have any other of our eastern hawks that have this kind of solid colored orangish tail, okay? This one has a lot of bars in it also. That's often a cue for a juvenile, but I don't think this is a juvenile. Let me show you how you identify this if you're not looking at the tail. Maybe you can't see the tail and you're looking up through your binoculars. If you see this belly band, see this splash of brown streaks across the belly, note that the chest is clean, and down here in the ventral area, this is clean. When I say clean, I mean unstreaked, but there's streaks across the middle. That's a good clue. That's your clue that this is a red-tailed hawk. All of our other hawks that have streaking on the chest, the streaks extend from the neck downward, okay? And they'll either be vertical or they might be horizontal, but certainly the other species of hawks have this chest area with some kind of streaking on them, but the red-tailed hawk does not. Also, here's another clue. See this dark bar across the inside portion of the forewing? The inside portion, that dark bar, we call that a patagial bar. Patagium is just a fancy word, Latin word for wing, but red-tailed hawks have this patagial bar there. So when they're flying, you can readily identify them based on those characteristics. When they're perched and you're driving down Interstate 93 or something and you see the big bird hawk perched on the side of the road, look for this splash of dark across the middle. Sometimes it can be very faint. You have to look closely, but that's a clue that it's the red-tailed hawk. Okay, now here's another interesting thing. How many of you remember, you can type this in your chat box, remember from the 1990s, there was a television program called Northern Exposure. It was on Sunday nights. Very often I'd be watching the New England Patriots. They'd be playing their 4 o'clock game and it would be over at 7, and then 60 Minutes would come on, and then 60 Minutes would go off, and when it goes tick, 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 tick. Is a blue sky just like this, and there's eagle soaring and circling through the sky, and it looks fantastically beautiful. It looks like it's a post office commercial, and this is what you hear. That shrill cry being emitted, it scares all of the small mammals and rodents, scares them into hiding. The problem is that's not the cry of the bald eagle, that's the cry of the red-tailed hawk, okay? The Hollywood engineer, and they put it over the sound of the bald eagle to make the bald eagle sound fierce, okay? Here's why. This is what the bald eagle sounds like. That's not striking the fear into anything. In fact, that sounds a little bit like one of the mice that maybe a bald eagle or red-tailed hawk would be trying to catch and eat. So Hollywood engineers do that very often. One time I was watching a Western and these cowboys were leaning up against one of those giant saguaro cactuses in Arizona, and a loon cried out in the night. And Hollywood sometimes plays these tricks. But if you're a bird watcher and you know your bird songs, then you catch on and you're wise to their tricks. Okay, now more birds around our homes. Notice where this bird is nesting, under the roof of a house. We might call this an eave or a soffit, depending on where you grew up. And there's this nondescript brown bird. Remember, the wren was also a nondescript brown bird, but does this bird have any horizontal bars? No, so this isn't a wren. Okay, we have guesses coming in pretty quickly. Good, Debbie, Stacy, and Ann all weigh in that this is a Phoebe. Nancy's agreeing. She's not sure, but she's willing to go with it. All right. This is, in fact, the Eastern Phoebe. Very good. They are famous for nesting under the eaves of our homes. If you have a torch light maybe out beside your front door or a back door, these guys will be able to, these guys like to nest in those locations, and they will return to the nest year after year. They will add to it, and it can build up over time. But this is the one example of a bird, I would say, if you know you have Phoebes, they will come back and build a new nest over the old one. So I would say don't remove this if you want to keep your Phoebes coming back. I'd say there might be some risk that they might go somewhere else. Hang on, I have a private message from one of the things I just want, from one of the audience I want to respond to. Okay, so that's the Eastern Phoebe. To me, the Eastern Phoebe is the true harbinger of spring. They usually show up around the last few days of March to the first few days of April. And they're a flycatcher. They eat insects. Notice that. They're in the flycatcher family, even though the word flycatcher isn't in their common name. When you look through your field guide for the Phoebe, you'll find it in the family with the flycatchers. These birds are very often victims of brown-headed cowbirds. And you might say, what are you talking about? We're going to talk about brown-headed cowbirds later in the presentation, but I wanted to make this note for you now. Nancy asked, why do they wag their tails? And Nancy, I don't know why they wag their tails. And what Nancy is referring to is if you observe a Phoebe on a clothesline or a wire or some other perch, could be a post, whatever, they often will raise their tail and let it fall. Raise their tail and let it fall over and over. Some people call it tail wagging. Some people call it tail flicking. They flick their tails. The other flycatchers don't do it. So it can be a very good ID characteristic for Eastern Phoebe. Now, the problem is too, or not the problem, the caution is Phoebes don't always flick their tails. So the absence of flicking tails does not indicate that it's not a Phoebe. The presence of flicking tails strongly suggests that it is a Phoebe. I'll tell you another bird, it's not in this presentation, but since we're talking about tail flicking, hermit thrushes, one of our woodland thrushes, they are also tail flickers, and the other birds of that group are not. Okay, good question, Nancy. I think this is a fabulous picture. Look how handsome this guy looks. Overall, he is not very colorful. He's kind of drab gray. He's got a lot of white in him. He's white below, gray above with a dark tail. Has kind of a scowling look with this curved upper bill. Okay. Notice the yellow iris. Okay. So these birds are yellow-eyed. When they are flying, when they extend their wings, they have big white wing patches. Very good, Ann Holbrook. Very good. This is the northern mockingbird. Okay. How many of you have northern mockingbirds up around your homes? Northern mockingbirds aren't super common in northern New England, not like they are where I grew up in Pennsylvania, but they are relatively abundant, and probably some of you have them around. I am going to teach you a little trick on how to identify mockingbirds and other related birds by their song, okay? First of all, it's important to know that these birds belong in a group called the mimids, okay? I'm going to type this into the chat box so you can see what I'm saying, not just hear what I'm saying. They're in the mimid group. And you can see that that looks a lot like this word, the mimids and mimics. So these birds, mockingbirds, are very good at mimicking other birds. Another member of the mimid family is a bird we saw earlier, the gray catbird. So these two birds are very closely related. And then there's a third mimid that we have in the east of the country called the brown thrasher. Okay, brown thrasher is much less common, but you can find brown thrasher in very dry, sandy areas. Okay, they're kind of a golden orange color. They're very beautiful. But here's how you tell them apart: by their voice. Okay, mockingbirds will repeat their phrases in threes or more. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate. Now, don't pay attention to what I say. Just count the number of times I say something before I go on to something else. Okay, here we go. Dee, 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 dee. Wah, wah, wah. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Wah, 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 wah. Dee-dee, dee-dee, dee-dee. Okay, that's the northern mockingbird. Threes or mores. Threes or more. Here's the brown thrasher. He repeats in twos. Dee-dee, wee, wee, ching, ching, dee-dee-dee, dee-dee-dee, Okay, twos. Then there's the gray catbird. He repeats in ones. And to say something repeats in ones means it doesn't repeat at all, right? So he sounds more like R2-D2, the little droid on Star Wars. All these different bells and whistles in all different directions that sound like nonsense. The other thing that the catbird does, though, is it makes a mew sound, from which it gets its name, catbird. It almost sounds like a whiny cat talking. So those are good clues, and they work. I certify that they work. They're very reliable for identifying all of our three eastern mimics by their voice. If you go out west, west of the Mississippi River, there are other members of the mimic family, other thrashers, and things don't work as well there. But this is fine for our eastern mimics. So hopefully you'll have some fun and experience, or fun and gain some experience figuring those out. Okay, here are two closely related birds. They're in the same family. What family do we think these two species are in? The bird on the top is a different species from the ones on the bottom. All right, so we have the guesses coming in that these are all swallows, and that is correct. Now, which swallow species do you think is on top? And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to let you know that there are about 4 or 5 different swallow species that we have in New Hampshire and can probably be found even in the Gilford area. Okay, here's the swallows that can be found in the Gilford area. Tree swallow, barn swallow, cliff swallow, northern ruffed-winged swallow, and bank swallow. So right there is 5. Okay, so we have a guess coming in that the one on the top is the barn swallow from Gilford and Nancy with question marks. So let's talk about that. You guys are correct. The one on top is the barn swallow, and then the one on the bottom is the tree swallow. Of our swallows, the tree swallow is by far the most abundant one that we have in New Hampshire, okay? And certainly in the Gilford area, much more abundant. Now let's look at them. Notice that they're both blue on the back, okay? Both blue on the back. This, I want to tell you, is something worth having binoculars for, is to look at these swallows through binoculars, especially when the sun is out. Because when the sun isn't out, we just see these swallows flying over a field or over a pond. And we think, oh yeah, that's nice, they're swallows, they come back every year. But boy, you put your binoculars on them, and if the sun hits this blue right, this is a metallic turquoise. Fantastic, it knocks your socks off. This is a bluish, deep bluish purple. Fantastic look, okay? The face of the barn swallow is this rusty orange, okay? And it comes down to a little bit of a bib in front. And then the chest is a creamy white. It's an off-white. You might say it's pale. I say it's even tan sometimes, compared to the white of the tree swallow, which is as white as this blank panel over here. This is snow white. And when they're flying, you can readily see this, and you can see this is kind of a smudgy, tanny white. This white on the tree swallow extends way up to the cheeks and throat and chin, whereas this has all this maroon orange color. Notice how long-winged both of these birds are. The wings extend well past the end of the body. And then here, look at this feature. See these two streamers? This is the tip of the tail. So very long-winged, but the tail is very exceptionally long. And in the barn swallow, it's forked. So each one of these represents each side of the fork of a tail, which gives the expression swallowtail. You might have heard of that, or you might have seen a swallowtail butterfly, which has the two streamers coming off the back. The tree swallow lacks that. The tree swallow does not have a long tail. It has a notched tail, but it is not long. It does not extend near at all past the wings. So the tree swallow is very short-tailed. So you could probably go out tomorrow and find some swallows flying around a field, over a field somewhere, and be able to see tree swallows for sure. And if you're in an agricultural setting where there's some old barns around, you'll probably even find some barn swallows. So that's good. And these guys both eat lots of insects, and we like that. Okay, this is now, this is a backyard bird presentation. So if you have a big lawn, or maybe even pasture, if you have some horses or something, you're gonna have swallows. But let's say your property isn't like that. Your property is more of a forested or wooded lot. A lot of people in New England live in kind of under a forest canopy. Then this is probably the most common bird you have in your yard. And remember, we're still talking about birds that don't come to feeders, okay? Anybody have any guesses on what this bird is? He is not very commonly seen. And particularly if you don't have binoculars, you probably, or if you're not using binoculars, you won't see this bird. He likes to be up in the trees, often near the top. Sometimes they come down, okay? But clean white chest, kind of a dullish back, olive green, gray cap, and with a red iris. Now you almost never see this red iris. This is a characteristic for this bird, but you have to identify it based on other things than this iris. But Ann Holbrook, you are correct. This is a vireo, and our most common forest vireo is this one, the red-eyed vireo. Okay, so if you are in one of these forested landscapes, the reason I bring this up, it's probably the most common bird we have in our forested landscapes. If you're motivated after this talk to get the binoculars out of the closet and you want to look for birds, you're going to hear this guy talking from the top of the tree, and he's going to drive you nuts because he sings nonstop. He says, "Here I am. No, I'm not. Here I am. Look at me. No, don't look here. Look over there." He kind of does this incessant back and forth conversation with himself. And people often wonder what they are. So Debbie indicates that she had one singing from the top of a tree in early spring. So be on the lookout for this guy if you live in one of those settings. If you live in more of a suburb type setting where there's interspersed tall trees, low shrubs, and open spaces, then you're likely to find this beautiful yellow bird. And a lot of times people will guess first that this might be what the goldfinch looks like. And they do share that they're both yellow, but a goldfinch has a big seed eater's bill, a big thick seed eater's bill. This is a thin, rather delicate bill. This is good for grabbing caterpillars off of leaves and things like that. Anybody have a guess on what the species is? Also very common nesting in and around our suburbs, gardens and homes. This is the yellow warbler, okay? Very often the yellow warblers are a favorite bird of bird watchers because they are so colorful and there's such a variety of them. And it's true. There's about 15, maybe 17 species of warblers that either pass through or nest in New Hampshire. They're a lot of fun to identify. I'm going to try to teach you how to identify this common one by its song. And if you have them around your house, you're going to hear them tomorrow for sure. Okay? So listen for the following. Sweet, sweet, little more sweet. Sweet, sweet, little more sweet. Now the bird's not going to say those words, but it's going to have these long E syllables or sounds. Sweet, sweet, little more sweet. All right, I'm going to play it for you. Go ahead and type in your chat box if you hear what the bird is saying. Okay, sweet, sweet, little more sweet. It's tough. I'm going to play it again. Okay, sweet, sweet, little more sweet. But there's no other birds in our neighborhoods that sing this song. So when you get to hear this, now they do have variations. They don't all sound exactly like the one I just played, but they have that general cadence, sweet, sweet, little more sweet. It could be slower, sweet, sweet, little more sweet, or it could be faster, sweet, sweet, little more sweet. Okay, listen for it. How many people hear that? And it's okay if you don't. Okay, Debbie hears it. Tina, it takes practice. Stacy hears it. It does take practice. One of the best ways to reinforce learning bird songs is to find a bird in your area that is singing with your binoculars. It takes some work and a little patience. Find it in your binoculars and see it singing. When you observe the bird singing, it somehow helps it go in and stick into your brain a little better. You go, ah, I see it. And then often when you hear that song, sometimes your memory will even replay for you the observation that you had when you saw the bird singing. So, okay, so that's the yellow warbler. They're a lot of fun. So here are birds that typically come to our feeders. So some of these might be a little more familiar to you. Very similar to the yellow warbler, but notice black wings and tail and black on the crown and top of the head. Very good, Stacy, Tina, and Nancy, excellent. This is the American goldfinch, okay? Very adept at coming to these tube feeders, and sometimes it could be a sock, but the feeder is filled with black Niger seed. I'm gonna type that in, black Niger. It's often also called thistle, black thistle. Sometimes Niger is spelled funny, like that, okay? Birds of this group like it very much. And I'm gonna even give a bonus hard question. Can anybody identify just the bottom half of this bird that is also at the feeder with the goldfinch? This is bonus points. Notice a little yellow on the wing here. If you're thinking pine siskin, you're correct. So pine siskins nest up in the White Mountain National Forest, up in the spruce and fir, and they come down in the wintertime. And sometimes we get these guys in our feeders in the wintertime. Okay, they like the similar food. One of the keys to attracting diverse birds to our yards is to offer diverse food and diverse ways of feeding them. Some birds like to feed on the ground. Some birds like to be on feeders. Some like thistle, some like sunflower seed. What does this bird like to eat? Does anybody feed this guy? I'm gonna guess most of you know what this is with the bright orange chest and belly, black hood. Yeah, very good. This is the Baltimore Oriole. I have Baltimore Orioles out nesting in and around my house every year, not just this year, but every year. They are very reliable. And yes, you can feed them oranges. You can go to the grocery store, buy some oranges, cut them into slices. You can put nail them into a tree, or somehow affix them or fasten them, and Orioles will come and enjoy the citrus pulp of the orange. It's kind of an interesting coincidence that the orange Orioles also like to eat oranges. There are other things that also like to eat oranges. The gray catbirds do as well. Orioles also like grape jelly. So if you're up for it, you can put out some grape jelly. I think they like that. They like anything kind of sugary and sweet. Here's a bird we were talking about. We mentioned earlier. I'm going to talk about it in a little more depth. These guys come to our feeders sometimes. Anybody seen these at your feeders? Notice it's all black and it has a brown head. This bird is in the blackbird family, okay? Interestingly, the Oriole we just saw is also in the blackbird family, okay? The common grackle that we talked about in comparison with the crow is also in the blackbird family. The crow is not in the blackbird family, and it's the one that's most black of all. It's actually in the family of crows, okay? But things like meadowlarks, orioles, and grackles, and these cowbirds, and the red-winged blackbird, let's not forget about him, are all in the blackbird family. What's interesting about the brown-headed cowbird, interesting and also problematic, is that the brown-headed cowbird does not build a nest. It does not know how to build a nest. It lays its eggs, the females will lay her eggs in the nest of other songbirds. As an example, the eastern Phoebe and the yellow warbler. The female will lay the eggs in there, and then those eggs will hatch. They will be incubated by the Phoebe parents or the yellow warbler parents. Unbeknownst to them, the egg contains not one of their chicks, but the chick of this brown-headed cowbird. These birds just aren't quite swift enough to figure out that, hey, somebody put an extra egg in here. How'd that happen? Where'd that come from? I don't remember laying 4 eggs. I remember laying 3. They don't do that. So this egg hatches, and then this baby cowbird grows much more rapidly, is much more aggressive in getting food. So when the parents come back with food deliveries, the baby cowbird steals all the food from its foster siblings, and then the foster siblings suffer. The baby cowbird will even push its foster siblings out of the nest. Okay, those nests get overcrowded, and there just ain't enough room for everybody. Somebody's got to go, so the cowbird pushes them out. So this can be a problem for bird populations where cowbirds become very abundant. Cowbirds become very abundant in areas in New England where forests are fragmented into little bits and pieces or absent. The cowbird is a bird that associates, based on its name, with cows or pasture or grasslands. So if you convert forest into agricultural land or suburbs and things like that, cowbirds will thrive, and then that will be take some toll on the songbirds. Okay, so Stacy has an observation that this may have happened at her house, and she wondered why one of the birds was so much bigger. We thought that it had hatched earlier than the others. Very likely, Stacy, that this was that what you observed was a cowbird event. Yeah, cowbird in the nest. Okay, so that's the brown-headed cowbird. Sorry for that long story, but it's a good one. So it's interesting how biology works. Now look at this fancy creature. What is this? And who has one coming to your house? Stacy, you are very good with your birds. Good job. A lot of times people will put in bluebird. Well, this is not a bluebird. This is the Indigo Bunting. Okay. It's a small seed-eating bird, and it's all blue. It is, hang on, it is more blue than the eastern bluebird. The eastern bluebird is bright blue on his back, but is brown or tan across the middle. And they're all, and eastern bluebirds are also very fat, pot-bellied looking, because they're actually a thrush. This is one of the finches, the Indigo Bunting. Who has Indigo Buntings coming to your feeders? Anybody? And if you wanted to see an Indigo Bunting, and of course, who wouldn't want to go see it, wouldn't want to see an Indigo Bunting, where would you go to look for one? Well, a great place to find them is on power line corridors, where every 10 to 15 years, the utility company comes by and mows all the vegetation. So the vegetation is always kind of scrubby and small, but there's also very tall, mature vegetation on the sides of the power line corridor. Indigo buntings love that type of habitat, and that's a great place to see them. So also, if you happen to live near one of those, and if you put out some seed and you feed birds, there's some likelihood that Indigo buntings will find your feeding station and come check you out. And that's a good thing. I mentioned at the beginning of the talk to some people that I led a bird walk, a guided birding tour in Groton on Saturday, and we saw an Indigo bunting on that trip. And guess where we saw it? On a power line. That's where we saw it. Okay, this bird is one of those little tiny small brown species that as a bird watcher you get very frustrated with because they're so hard to identify. This is one of the sparrows, okay? This sparrow is the one that is most likely to be bouncing around and feeding on your cut lawn. If you cut your grass and you've got these little brown streaky guys in your grass, look for, with your binoculars, which you're going to pull out of the closet, look for this beautiful chestnut colored cap and this black stripe through the eye and a black bill. Look at the contrast of that head. That is handsome. That is good to look at. This is the chipping sparrow. It's one of our smallest sparrows. It may be our smallest sparrow. When we're identifying sparrows, we often start out with an initial question that helps us divide all the sparrows into manageable groups to think about. And the question is the chest streaked or unstreaked? And in this case, with the chipping sparrow, the chest is unstreaked, or I like to say clean. It's clean chested. The other common sparrow that you're going to have in your yard, and now, and even in the winter time, has a streaked chest with a central breast spot. That would be the song sparrow. But this is the chipping sparrow, and is one of my favorites. I think he's absolutely adorable. This is the last bird of our presentation. Thank you for this survey of some backyard birds and for your participation. I know this is a favorite of many of you, and it's also a favorite of mine, and I have an extra special treat to show you when we're done talking about this guy. But Anne has this right. What species, though, of hummingbird is this? Let's be a little more specific. This is a hummingbird, and we all know we can feed hummingbirds. If you can get a feeder at Home Depot or Walmart or many stores, or you don't even need to buy a feeder. If you put out a red cup with sugar water in it and you keep putting it out regularly, they will find it. Very good, Stacy and others. This is the ruby-throated hummingbird. It's our only species of hummingbird east of the Mississippi River, okay? Only rarely do other species show up. Occasionally, a rufous hummingbird will show up. If you go west of the Mississippi River, there's a bunch more. There's probably about 15 more different species of hummingbirds. And there are a total of 360 species of hummingbirds in the entire world, okay? All of them, all 360, live in the Americas, North, Central, or South America. That's where all the hummingbirds are. There are none in Asia, none in Africa, none in Australia. So all 360 live in the Americas, and only about 12 to 15 in North America. So that means there's about 350 living through Central America and South America, and most of those live, of course, in places like Brazil and Ecuador and Peru, all of those tropical places. So very good. Now, if you want to feed these, here's what you do. You can mix your own solution to feed them. 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. Okay, I'm going to type that in the chat box. 4 parts water plus 1 part sugar. Okay, so if you're talking tablespoons, it's 4 tablespoons for 1 tablespoon of sugar. 4 gallons of water for every gallon of sugar. Whatever units you want to use, just keep them consistent. Now, if we feed them sugar water, what do hummingbirds eat? What do they eat anything else besides sugar water? Go ahead and type in your chat box. What other things, if any, do hummingbirds eat? Okay, Stacy says nectar, and nectar is essentially sugar water. That's a sugar water solution produced by a plant, okay, to attract things like hummingbirds and insects. Anne says headed insects to feed their young, okay? Yeah, hummingbirds eat a lot of insects, okay? If you're raising babies, they can't raise them just on sugar water, carbohydrates. Man can't live on bread and water alone, and neither can hummingbirds. No organism can. So now imagine we're not feeding birds at all. We're not feeding the hummingbirds. And we see them go and they're putting their bill into a flower and we say to get nectar. But what else is inside that flower? Not just nectar. There's lots of other insects in there going after that sugary solution. And these hummingbirds are also grabbing insects, okay? Because they need the protein to deliver back. They're also very good at eating spiders because they can hover. They can pick spiders right out of a web. They can also steal prey that the spider catches in its web and pick that out of the web because they can hover. Okay, I could go on and on and on about hummingbirds, and I want to. So I'm going to talk just a little bit more about them. I want to share something really neat with you. I stopped sharing my screen because I'm going to share a different screen with you. I hope. Let's see if this works out. Okay, so let me escape this. Nope, 1 second. Stop sharing that. Share. I think I want to share this. But it keeps coming back to that. Your screen, stop share. Okay, 1 second here. Do this. And screen share. Okay, here we go. I think I got it. Can everybody see like a hurricane brewing in the Gulf of Mexico? Can you see that? Eddie, nod your head yes up and down if you can see that. Okay, good, thank you. All right, here's what I really want to show you though, is this thing. I'm going to expand my screen and I think you can see a map of North America. And I have to move something around a little bit here. Okay, so this map was the data that is used to populate this map comes from volunteers, volunteer bird watchers like you and me, who indicate that they have a ruby-throated hummingbird at their house, or they don't have one, things like that. So notice the wheat here bar here on the right, and it's so the hummingbirds are. And we don't have them up here. We don't know necessarily where they go, but now when we look at this, we figure there's a lot of people in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, even in Florida, reporting that the other thing I want you to notice is the relative abundance color bar. Notice that well, there's a lot of hummingbirds right here, down here in Central America. Now, let's tick it forward a little bit. Let's see if I can do this. I have, okay. Okay, now I stopped it. We're in February. Things haven't really changed a whole lot. It's still winter up here. Hummingbirds are still enjoying Central America. We're going to continue it to March. Started to expand upward into Mexico. But we know from our experience that they don't show up until early May, right, in our area. Let's continue to tick this forward. Okay, it's April. Look here where it's very, very dark blue. There's most of the hummingbirds are here and here. What does that tell us? Tells us they flew across the Gulf of Mexico. Hummingbirds on their spring migration are flying across the Gulf of Mexico, those little buggers. And that's how they arrive into North America. Notice there's a gap. There are some hummingbirds here, but there's a big gap here. of data that's missing. So they must not, they could be overflying people, but it's clear that most of them are going. So let's continue it now into May. Hang on a second. My thing, there it goes. Into May. Now, all of a sudden they burst up and are up over most of North America into New Hampshire. This is by early June, okay? And there's a central area here in, I guess that's Missouri and Arkansas, Wisconsin. Up here in New England, there's a center where there's lots and lots of hummingbirds. Let's keep it going. Okay, it's August. Notice how there's much more blue. Why is there more blue in August? Where'd all the additional hummingbirds come from? Those are the babies. So now when people are reporting, they're reporting even more hummingbirds because all of the adults that came up have reproduced. Are they showing up in Yucatan first? No, they're flowing in around Mexico. So the birds on their spring return to the breeding areas, they fly across the Gulf of Mexico, but in the fall, they mostly take a Gulf of Mexico route, what we would call a circumgulf route. In the spring, they are trans-Gulf or across the Gulf, and in the fall, they're circumgulf. We're going to continue. So that's September. Hang on. I'm trouble. There they've flown back in November. So I'm going to run it. I'm going to run it through its entirety now so you can see it. This is all populated by volunteers, which is an incredible thing. There it is spreading up. And here they are coming back down through the Gulf of Mexico. Whoop. Okay, so I wanted to share that with you. I think it's a fantastic thing, and it motivates me to encourage you all to use your binoculars and bird book, identify those birds, and then you can contribute to databases just like this one. Hang on, I have to get my toolbar back here, my chat box. More chat. There's a website called eBird. I'm typing it into the chat box, ebird.org. So if you're interested to learn more about birds or adding your own observations about birds, you can do this. This is called crowdsourcing. It's where many, many people contribute data on something, and it helps us learn big picture things and concepts. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to allow you guys to ask some questions. And I see Brian has a question. Is this observational data? Yeah, Brian, this is observational data. They have not been tagged. It's just that there are so many volunteer observers out there indicating that they have seen birds over time. So it is not tagging of individual birds. So I think now, if you want to, if you have a question, you can either choose to type it into the chat box and I'll read it and answer it. Or I think we can one at a time have people unmute and you can answer your question out loud. And
Steve, this is Brian.
Yes.
I apologize because I was trying to transition to my computer, so I didn't hear a lot of the presentation. And I assume you covered woodpeckers.
I did not actually cover woodpeckers in this. I cover woodpeckers in my winter backyard bird presentation, but I don't cover them in this one.
Okay, well, this is a question I've had, and I've talked to people up here. What I think I'm seeing out in my yard is a red-bellied woodpecker. But when I look at, the manuals I have, this seems to be a lot further north than their normal, where they normally would habitat.
Yes.
And is that, have you observed that too? Are we seeing a lot more additional red-bellied woodpeckers?
Yeah, very good question, Brian. And the answer to your question is yes. So let me elaborate a little bit. 20 to 30 years ago, red-bellied woodpecker was a very rare and difficult bird to see in New Hampshire. Since that time, the range for red-bellied woodpecker and a number of other birds, I'll add, has expanded northward. So many of the field guides have not caught up with that necessarily. Or if a lot of times we buy a field guide and we say, well, the birds haven't changed, so this field guide is still going to be fine. It might have been published in 1970 or 1980, but it's true, the birds do not change that quickly, but their distributions can. So Brian, I will tell you that there's a very, very strong likelihood that you are seeing red-bellied woodpeckers in your yard. I'd almost guarantee it. They're common now.
Do you think that's associated with climate change?
I think there's a very strong likelihood that it is, and I'll tell you why. There are more birds. So if it was not associated with, let's say if it was just random. If it was random, then we would expect approximately an equal number of birds to be expanding their range to the south or to the east or to the west, if it wasn't cued into anything, if it was just random. But there are a number of examples of birds that are increasing their range or distribution towards the north. Carolina wren is another good example of one of those birds that's expanding its range northward. And there are some others too. So I'm in the camp that it is due to milder winters for these resident birds that don't migrate, expanding their range northward. Yeah, thanks for your question. Okay, Chip asks that I please repeat the sound difference between the thrasher and catbird, which repeats twice. So Chip, the thrasher repeats twice. Dee-dee, wee, wee, chee, chee. Okay, catbird does not repeat at all and sounds like random R2-D2 from Star Wars. Okay, so
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. And thanks everyone for your comments. I want to encourage you to reach out to Stacy and to Maria at the Gilford Public Library. Give them your feedback about the program. If you enjoyed it or if there are aspects you thought could be improved, give them your feedback and then they can relay that to me. I'm always looking to improve my programs. And if there's another program, I number of other programs I offer, and maybe we could do another one of those sometime. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah. Thank you, Tina and Stacy. Stacy's got a lot of good bird knowledge too, so you guys can check in the desk with her with some bird questions.
I only know what's in my backyard. That's it. Other than that, I don't have a clue, but a great presentation. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And thank you very much. And like Steve said, please give us your feedback. We do welcome it. And it helps us to continue to bring great programs to the library and to you.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you. Thank you all for your positive feedback. If any of you want to check out my website, it's openworldexplorers.com. Last thing I'll say is go grab those binoculars and have some fun.